This video aims to introduce the origins and the mechanisms of Ponzi scheme, as well as its resemblance with other financial crises. First, let's start with the origins of the Ponzi scheme. The Ponzi scheme is named after Charles Ponzi, who immigrated to the United States in 1903. In 1919, the post-World War I global economic system was in chaos. Ponzi alleged that he had hired agents to purchase cheap international reply coupons in other countries and would exchange them for stamps that were more expensive than the coupons was originally purchased for. Under the heading of his company, Securities Exchange Company, he promised returns of 50% in 45 days or 100% in 90 days. Because the first investors all gained the promised return at the specific dates, more and more investors were attracted by the scheme. After 1 year, Ponzi received investments valued at about $15 million, and Americans considered him ranked alongside Colombia and Macro as one of the greatest Italians. The scheme lasted until August of 1920, when the Boston Post began investigating Ponzi's company. Ponzi was arrested by the federal authorities, and it turned out that Ponzi had only purchased 2 coupons in total, although the money he got could purchase millions of coupons. So, how the scheme works? The Ponzi scheme is the ancestor of the pyramid scheme. In short, Ponzi scheme uses the new investors' money to pay interest to the old investors to create a profitable illusion. There's indeed no real investment in the financial market. At the beginning, the Ponzi swindler would persuade the very first investor to buy in by promising a much higher return. The swindler will keep on increasing the promised return to attract more investors. The very small risks and high returns, which are not even affected by the market conditions, will attract more people to invest. In fact, in order to prevent investors from realizing this lie, Ponzi repackaged their investment strategies and the principles very complicated so that people could not understand their operation. Moreover, they did not disclose their official paperwork. To support the cash outflow to the original investors, the Ponzi scheme requires more investors to contribute their money so as to build up a larger combined portfolio to fulfill the very first statements. During this process, the Ponzi scheme actually transfers the credit risk of such portfolios to the later investors, because once the scheme lacks cash flow, the whole scheme will break down and people can never get their required return. Financial crisis shares similarities with Ponzi schemes. Here we list 4 of them. Number 1. Building on top of false expectations. In a Ponzi scheme, schemers rebrand an investment option into having higher returns than what it actually yields. Similarly, during the 2008 financial crisis, rating agencies rated some risky subprime mortgages as 3As, which did not correspond to the quality of the mortgage. For both cases, a less desirable product is repackaged into something more attractive by promising higher returns despite the risk of investing, such as false expectations. In fact, bubbles themselves are products of false expectations. Everyone realizes their losses when the bubble bursts. Number 2. Transfer of credit risk. In a Ponzi scheme, the schemer passes all their losses to the investors who haven't yet cashed out when the Ponzi unravels. Meanwhile, in the financial crisis, securitization allows institutions to transfer credit risk to capital markets and focus on generating fees. Both masterminds help carry out the transfer of funds while passing on credit risks. Many investors are then left holding the bag, while the smart money walks away with the dough. Number 3. New growth provides the illusion of prosperity. As revenue grows, people tend to have the false expectation that it will last forever. In the original Charles Ponzi scheme, consistent flow of returns are promised, regardless of market conditions, which is obviously impossible. As for financial crisis, before the 2008 financial crisis, average house prices across the US has risen for more than 30 years. Even though some scholars claimed that the housing market was like a bubble, most people regard it as a boom, which is clearly an illusion. Number 4. A mass mania occurs where everyone wants to get a piece of action. At first, Charles Ponzi's idea was promoted by newspapers as a stroke of financial genius. When someone joined the scheme and received extraordinary returns, others believed that they were left behind and rushed to get a piece of cake. This is how the scheme spread. Financial crisis usually comes with speculative manias, in other words, economic bubbles. The Japanese asset price bubble was followed by lost decade. The burst of the United States housing bubble led to 2008 financial crisis. Dot-com bubble, where investors poured money into internet startups, burst in 2000, which resulted in the early 2000s recession. Now, let's move to differences. First one is between the loss of developed and developing countries. The overall loss due to the Ponzi scheme for the developing countries is more significant, as their supervision system is not mature. Thus, the government failed to identify and respond to the Ponzi scheme timely before they caused significant damage. For developed countries, they tend to have a more mature financial regulation system to support and protect the market. Thus, Ponzi scheme could be identified and eliminated at once before it's too late. During a financial crisis, however, developed countries tend to suffer more from the recession. They are more vulnerable to global economic downturns than the developing countries because they are more globalized, thus more reliable to the goods and services from the worldwide markets. For developing countries, they are not as globalized as developed countries, so the negative influence due to the financial crisis is relatively limited. In addition, there are also problems like personal morality and ethnic risks associated with the Ponzi scheme. If people are not responsible to other social members in the society, they tend to utilize Ponzi scheme to gain benefits by having others bearing the loss. On the contrary, financial crisis does not have these risks. Third, Ponzi scheme and the financial crisis brought impact to different degrees. In the original Charles Ponzi scheme, investors lost about $20 million. In 2008, the one by Madoff defrauded $50 billion. A large proportion of victims are relatives, friends, and wealthy people, so the impact was more regional. In contrast, the 2008 financial crisis brought a loss of $13 trillion merely to the US, which spread to Europe, South America, Asia, and Africa. Therefore, the impact of financial crisis was often global and more profound. Fourth, the prevention methods of Ponzi scheme and the financial crisis are different. To get away from Ponzi scheme, start from yourself. Keep your money under your control and don't rely on a single advisor or friend. Remember to invest in products that you understand and check the investment regularly. Also, diversification. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. To prevent the next financial crisis, all people should unite together. Banks, governments, international organizations, and citizens should all pay efforts to strengthen the economy. In this video, we gave an introduction to the Ponzi scheme and its similarities and differences with the financial crisis. Thank you for watching.